Life's adversities forge resilience, which is a theme embodied by the ancient Stoics like Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus. It's this kind of grit, determination, brilliance, and humility that's foundational to the failing up mindset. Today's guest, David Velasquez, personifies these attributes. Born to war immigrants from Central America, David's early life in Los Angeles was marked by struggle, yet despite financial constraints, his family eventually found a home in Rosamond, California, where his parents' unwavering commitment and aspiration for a brighter future fueled David's academic pursuits. David not only entered the University of Southern California, graduating with top honors, but also earned a spot at Harvard Medical School. There, he pursued a Doctor of Medicine degree while also securing 2 master's degrees in business and public policy from both the Harvard Business School and the Harvard Kennedy School, a record first to complete all 3 of these degrees back-to-back in the university's nearly 400-year history. As he nears graduation, David's story stands as a beacon of hope, illustrating how obstacles can serve as a path forward. With a heart for community service and plans to innovate healthcare post-residency, David's journey, carved from hardship, discipline, and love, offers profound wisdom and inspiration. Join us as we explore his amazing journey today, right here on Failing Up. Quick one before this episode starts, if I could ask a favor from you. If you haven't yet already hit the subscribe or the follow button, wherever you're enjoying this podcast, be it YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, could you please just go ahead and hit that button in your app? It really helps this show more than I could possibly say. And thank you so much and enjoy the conversation. So, David, welcome to the Failing Up podcast. I want to thank you so much for joining us here today. And I am so honored to be here with you and for you to take time away from your very busy schedule to hang out with us and let us in on your life and your experience and your process. I'm super excited about today and about this interview. So let's get started a bit talking about your life and where you come from. You and I share a common background. We're both from the same geography in Lancaster, Palmdale area, Antelope Valley. Tell us a bit about your upbringing, your life as a kid, and let's just start there.
That sounds great, Rich. First, thanks so much for having me on your podcast. I'm really excited to be here and have a genuine conversation with you. There's a lot that I can say about my upbringing, so I'll try to be brief but detailed at the same time. As you mentioned, I did spend a lot of time in the Antelope Valley, but before that, I actually grew up in Los Angeles. So I grew up in downtown Los Angeles, California, right there on the corner of Wilshire and Union, if you're familiar, in a 1-bedroom apartment where me, my parents, and my 3 brothers all lived. My 2 brothers and I, my 2 older brothers and I shared a mattress in that in that living room, whereas my little brother was in a baby crib and my parents were in the bedroom. So that's kind of what my life looked like for about 5 years. We were in a community where the majority of the population was Spanish speaking, a lot of immigrants, including my parents, who I'm happy to talk about more, but immigrated to the United States in 1993 from Central America. And growing up in that neighborhood really showed me a lot of the good and a lot of the bad of society, life in general. A lot of the good was the community. Right, you're growing up, you're with a lot of families, a lot of people who really care, a lot of people who are compassionate and who love you as a neighbor. And that was something that I really got a chance to experience during those 5 years. But on the flip side, a lot of us were housing insecure. We were living paycheck to paycheck. Parents, adults often only talked about how to make the rent the next month and such. And then from there, we were actually in 2001, if I remember correctly, we were evicted from the apartment that we were in. And that's when we went to a family shelter home in Los Angeles. And we spent several months there, celebrated a couple of birthdays. And from then on, we bounced around a little bit more throughout Los Angeles. The other part about this is that my parents were actually awaiting their asylum application process to go through. So they were immigrants. They had fled the war in Central America, and they were waiting for their permanent green cards. But as you're familiar, I'm sure the process takes a long time. And thankfully, in 2001, they received their green cards. Their asylum applications were approved. And that put us on the path to reach a little bit further and have a home. And so in 2001, that's when we actually moved to the Antelope Valley, as you mentioned. So we went to Palmdale, California, because actually it was the one place that our Section 8 housing voucher helped us qualify for. We had no idea what Palmdale was. We had no idea what Lancaster was, the Antelope Valley in general. But we went out there to Palmdale, California in 2001. I remember showing up, and one of the first memories that I have that I will never forget is stopping at the Taco Bell. That is right off the freeway. Once you hop off of Palmdale, California on Avenue R, I believe is the exit.
Exactly.
And it's still there. The Taco Bell is still there. But we had a meal, and we would often celebrate with Taco Bell or other fast food like that when there was a big moment. And so I remember eating the chalupa, which I absolutely love. And that was the start of our journey in the Antelope Valley, which you're familiar with. From then on, essentially, we were living in Section 8 housing for about the next 5 to 6 years, which meant that we bounced around a bit. So I went to 3 different elementary schools in Palmdale because we were moving about every year and a half to 2 for a number of reasons related to the program in particular. Perhaps the landlord, for example, didn't want to be part of it anymore, or they sold the house or something like that. And so I went to school in Palmdale where, I can talk hours about my experience there in elementary school and, good influences, bad influences. But essentially what happened is that in 2006, my family decided to move because we were again going to not lose the Section 8 voucher, but we were not going to be able to continue to use it in the current home we were in. So we had to move again. And so we went to Rosamond, California in 2006, June of that year, where we were new again to this neighborhood. And I was starting 6th grade. In Rosamond, we were in this house for about 3 years. But I'm sure you remember, in 2008, 2009, the housing financial crisis hit. And my parents lost their jobs. And so we lost our home again in 2009. And that was the year that I was going to enter high school. And it was a really hard time, a really hard moment. There was a lot going on, also thinking about the day-to-day stuff, the next paycheck, the next set of bills, and so forth. But thankfully, there were some families in the neighborhood that helped us out. Some families that lent my father some money so that we could sleep in a motel. And that's what happened for that summer. So it was a summer before high school where me, my 3 brothers, and my parents slept in a 1-bedroom, or actually a studio motel right there on Sierra Highway. We slept there for a couple of months while my parents tried to find work, tried to save some money in order to be able to rent another home. And throughout that time, I was trying to get ready for high school, right? How old was I at that point? 13, going on to 14. And I was just trying to figure out, how do I make the basketball team this winter or this fall? And is there something else that I want to do in high school? But at the same time, there's this other part of me that is trying to figure out, how do I help my family? And there were a lot of moments in that motel that I remember vividly. It was there, I think, that I grew up very fast, where I first started to realize how poverty was affecting me and my family. Before that, I knew that we didn't have much money. I knew that economic scarcity was a thing, but I did not know what the all-encompassing poverty really felt like. To think about it, to feel it, to see how it impacts you, your brothers, your parents, those around you, that was new to me. And thankfully, after a couple of months in that motel, we found another home in Rosamond, California, where we stayed up until I graduated from high school. And I ended up going to high school in Rosamond, California. Had a great time there, learned a lot, did a lot, and I was fortunate enough to go on to college afterward. So I'll stop there, Rich, because I know I said a lot, but I wanted to give you some detail and be as brief as possible on my journey before college.
It's an amazing journey. It gives us so much context as to how, the beginnings of a person's life really does determine trajectory for better or worse. And that type of environment can really set the stage for just raw determination and perspective. It's fascinating to know. As you're talking, I'm thinking back through, having grown up in Lancaster. I grew up on J9 in Lancaster. Being able to picture that within my mind's eye as you're describing that, it paints a very vivid understanding and insight as to what you had to endure. And it brings to mind so many questions. Let's talk a bit about your mom and your dad. Yes, I would love for you to answer those questions and give us some insight as to who they are as people, how they influenced you. You were struggling with financial means, but it's very apparent to me and anyone watching this that you have a genuine, warm heart and you're a good person. And that comes from your upbringing largely. So give us a bird's eye view into who your parents are and how they influenced you in your life.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to. So my parents are Calixto Velasquez and Sarah Velasquez, but my mom likes to be called by her middle name, Rebecca. And they are from Central America. My father grew up in the capital city of Managua in Nicaragua. And he grew up in the 60s and the 70s when they had a dictatorship under the Somoza regime. And so my dad was part of the movement to basically bring democracy to Nicaragua. And that meant, as being a teenager, going out and sleeping in the forest, in the jungles, and trying to overtake the government, essentially. And so he actually spent over a decade fighting that war with a number of other folks from the barrios in Nicaragua. And that included his brother, my uncle, who I never got a chance to meet because he was murdered during that war. He was shot while he was near my dad during one night. And that was something that he thinks about a lot. And not just that, but a lot of the memories from just sleeping in the jungle, sleeping on top of trees, by the cemeteries, all the stories that he's told me. And so that gives you, I think, a little bit of insight into how his life was and also how different his life was than mine and a lot of ours. And, you can see aspects of that in him today still. I describe him as somewhat stoic, but he's gotten a little bit softer and more emotional as he's aged and as I think we have come of age as well. But he was, definitely the type of father who wanted to see me and my brothers do well. He wanted to make sure that we were committed and that we were good kids and determined and so forth. And so he really influenced me a lot growing up. And I certainly wouldn't be here without him. My mother, she had a rough upbringing in that she was the oldest of about 9. And she therefore had to take care of a lot of her siblings. And she, however, became a very powerful, a very beautiful, strong woman. And, today she is my hero. And so she eventually, made her way up to Mexico, which is where she actually met my father.
What part of Mexico?
There they lived in, I think it was, I'm going to have to double check this. It's, Sonora. Sorry, Sonora.
Okay.
Sonora is actually where they lived. I'm not sure if that's where they met exactly, but that is where they lived after they met. And so they spent a lot of time there together. And again, they have a number of stories from living in Mexico because they were poor and didn't have much. And, they had just both fled their home countries. And so they actually were functioning as servants to a wealthier family at a ranch in Mexico. And my dad was kind of taking care of the cows, animals outside, while my mom was taking care of the family's children and eventually 2 of hers, in addition to taking care of other house tasks. And so they spent a number of years there in Mexico, actually, before they realized that they wanted to give their children a better future. And so that's when in 1993, as I mentioned earlier, they came to the United States under the asylum application process and eventually became residents of this country. And today, my parents, or my mom in particular, since I've mentioned my dad a bit, she continues to work. She loves to work. My mom I think she works harder than I do. She's always on the go. She always has multiple jobs, serving at restaurants. She's going to banquets and serving there. She's cleaning houses. She is doing it all, and also taking care of 2 dogs and a cat and turtles. And, she just really is a superhero. And so I think a lot of my drive, a lot of why I'm always on the go and always doing a million things is probably because of her. So that's a little bit about my parents and who they are. And my brothers, I have 3 brothers, 2 older and 1 younger. Josue, my oldest, Irvin, second oldest, and then Lester, my younger brother. And they are equally amazing. My oldest brother always took care of us when we were kids. As you can imagine, my parents had to work a lot. And so my oldest brother would take care of us when we were home. And my second brother similarly took care of me and my younger brother. And eventually we all kind of found our path. My oldest brother currently is a deputy in the LA Sheriff's Department. And my second brother, he became a pharmacy tech right after, or soon after graduating from high school. I think it's important to note that they honestly gave me the opportunity to dream of going to college, because when they graduated from high school, they were expected to work and support our family. And so there was that big expectation on them. Whereas when I graduated high school, there was less of that expectation. And then my little brother actually joined the military right after high school. He joined the U.S. Marines and has been serving ever since.
How many years has that been? How long has he been in the military?
So he joined, I believe it was October 2015. So he's been in for, maybe it might have been, I think it was 2015. So I'd say about 8 years at this point.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank him for his service for us. That's really cool. Yeah. Where's he stationed right now, or can you say?
Oh, I can. So he's currently in Jacksonville, North Carolina.
Nice. Very cool. What's his MOS? What does he do in the military? What's his job?
Yeah, he does supply chain management.
That's amazing. Very cool. Your brothers, your mom, your dad, they all sound incredible. Real quick, I'm a bit of a stats geek, so check this out. On the back end of our YouTube channel, it says here that 85.3% of you that watch this channel haven't yet hit the subscribe button. I just want to ask you a favor. It helps this channel so much if you choose to subscribe. It helps us scale the guests, scale the production. It makes the show bigger. If I could just ask one favor, if you've watched this show before and you've enjoyed it and you like the episode that you're currently watching, could you please just hit the subscribe button? Thank you so much. And I will repay the gesture by making sure that everything we do here gets better, and better. That is a promise I'm willing to make to you. Are you in? All right. So high school, I guess tell us, combine both your high school experience and kind of when you started to think about wanting to go into medicine. Was that a thought long in your mind since you were younger, or is that something you kind of stumbled upon in high school? When did that occur?
Yeah, great question, Rich. There wasn't a moment where I said, I want to be a doctor. For me, I think it was a number of instances that I reflected on that then said, you should consider going into medicine because it's a way through which you can give back to your community. It's a way in which you can hopefully help some of the people you see suffering around you. And so a couple of those instances were, one, when I talked about that motel before I started high school, my mom actually got really sick. Unclear exactly what she had because she never got the healthcare that I thought she needed in that moment. But she, had a cough, fatigue, maybe a pneumonia or a really bad flu, unclear. But she was feeling really sick, and I wanted to take her to the hospital. I couldn't drive. I didn't have a license. I had no money. I was 13, going on to 14. And I remember telling my dad, asking my dad and saying in Spanish, can we take my mom to the hospital? And he looked at me, he thought about it, considered it, and ultimately said in a very nice way, we can't, because we need the gas so that I can go to work tomorrow. So we were always thinking about how much gas do we have in our car, and you have to pay for gas, and we just didn't have the money. And I felt really bad in that moment and in the days afterwards, because I really wanted to help take care of her. Thankfully, she made it. She got past the illness. But it was certainly a moment in which I, after reflecting on it, said, I don't want that to be anyone, whether it's my mom or another vulnerable person. I don't want anyone to have to go without having access to healthcare. And if we had maybe more doctors in the area, or, if a doctor came to visit, things would be a little bit better. And so it was that instance combined with the passing of my tia, who it was my oldest brother's godmother, who passed away from breast cancer at a very young age. She was in her 30s. That, we saw her, we actually heard about her passing a little bit later. My mom decided to tell us when we got a little bit older, and we realized she wasn't visiting us anymore. But I noticed that she passed away at a very young age. And as a kid, you know that people shouldn't die when they're in their 30s or 40s or 50s. And I loved her. And thinking about that as well reminded me that we need more healthcare. We need more doctors. We need folks that are thinking about people like my tia, like my mom. And then I said, maybe I should go into medicine. But when I was in high school, I had no idea how to do that. I didn't know how to apply to college. No one in my family had done it before. No one was thinking about it. And only a few of my friends had thought about it as well. And so when I was in high school, I was pretty good at math and science. That was my thing. I was a mathlete. I was part of the science club. I loved all that kind of stuff. And so I did well, thankfully, when I was younger and hadn't seriously considered college. But that placed me in a position later where I could consider it. By the time that I was a junior in high school, I began to seriously think about college and whether it was the right thing for me. And I talked to a few folks, including some of my friends. I talked to one of my teachers, Mr. Schrader, who, really served as a mentor for me when I was in high school. And they led me to believe that I can go to college. And so thankfully, because of people telling me that I can do it, because I did well academically, because I did well outside the classroom too. I was a part of the cross country, track, and basketball teams. I got a chance to go to college. And, that was something that I still remember the day that I got into college. It was, I think, the happiest day of my life, even a happier day than when I got into Harvard.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. USC. I remember as a kid growing up, anyone that went to USC, I just thought, my goodness, they're a god among gods. How did they do that? It's in our neck of the woods, USC was like the place to go. That, UCLA, Berkeley, and a few other colleges, of course. But USC was high on my list. Much later in my life, I didn't get started as young as you did. But to hear that you had that gumption and that drive and that desire and the goal set very early on in your life is super encouraging. And it was cool that you had people around you, despite where you grew up. Which high school again? Remind me, in Rosamond? Were you at Rosamond High?
That's right, Rosamond High School.
Okay. Yeah. And knowing what little I know about that high school, actually you could probably enlighten us a bit about that high school. And what are the odds of someone coming from that high school getting into college, much less, an elite school like USC? Tell us about that, what your knowledge of that is.
No, of course. Great question, Rich. So Rosamond High School is a small high school in Rosamond, California. And the high school tends to be under-resourced. When I was there, we didn't have that many advanced placement or AP classes, for example. We didn't have that many clubs. I remember actually my first year when I tried to join the cross-country team, they had thought about getting rid of it because we just didn't have enough people who were interested. And so there weren't, and even beyond that, we had one counselor for this entire school of about 800 students.
Mhm.
It was
Wow.
average 200 per class, but then you subsequently had fewer and fewer students as the years went by because students would drop out or they would be transferred to a continuation school if they were performing poorly academically.
Mhm.
And so the high school itself is a place where that I have fond memories of. You know, I developed a lot of great friendships, have a lot of fantastic memories from high school, but you know, the school itself didn't have enough funding. It didn't have enough resources for all of us. And so at least in my graduating class, and I'm sure just looking at the other graduating classes, it's true for them, there were about 7 students who went to a university, to a 4-year university.
Wow.
The majority
7.
of students,
Wow.
the majority of students would go to the military and serve. They would work locally, or they would go to the community college, AVC, Antelope Valley College. So that was where the majority would go. And then just a handful every year would go to a 4-year university. In my class, I was the only person who went to USC. And at least from what I had been told, no one else had gotten into USC from Rosamond High School, at least from graduating directly. Unclear if anyone had transferred before. And so it was a rarity, certainly, that I got a chance to go to college. Or to USC in particular. And even though the school was under-resourced, you know, even though we didn't have all the classes that many other high schools had, it still got the job done, or it helped me get the job done and get to where I needed to get. But certainly placed me, I'm sure, and many others at a disadvantage relative to students at better resourced high schools.
Yeah, absolutely. Those numbers were striking. 7 out of a class of 200, you said? Is that roughly?
About 200. I think by the time I graduated, as I mentioned, a few came off. So it was closer to 160.
Wow. And you were the only that went to USC. That's really shocking. It says so much about you as a person, but just so much about the difficulties and struggles that our schools here in local Los Angeles County are going through. And man, if I could just have every single one of those kids watch this podcast, that would be amazing, because they can gain so much from you on how to overcome those odds. Let's talk a bit about, so you get into USC, and at this point you're thinking medicine, you're doing undergrad. Did you pick a major right away at USC, or did you drop into biology? What was your undergrad major?
Yeah, great question. So I actually was a biomedical engineering major when I first got to USC. And it was because I didn't think I could make it to medical school. And I thought that at least having that engineering degree would mean that I could, at the end of the day, have a well-paying job through which I could help my family. So I thought being an engineer would 4 years college, go back, work, give my parents money, help, support my family in general, and move on with my life. And so I actually started as a biomedical engineering student, but that quickly changed. I think I changed my major about 4 or 5 times in the first couple of months of college. And ultimately I majored in human biology and was a pre-med student as well. So I realized after talking to some friends, hearing from my parents, that I could do it, and that if I worked hard enough, if I was committed, then I could make it to medical school. And it happened.
Wow. What would you tell young people in your high school to find their way out of the Antelope Valley, do what they dream to do, to think beyond the confines of their socioeconomic limitations, and do what their heart is telling them they can do?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that I could say. I think the first thing is that they can do it. I think that's something that I've mentioned a few times now, and it's something that more and more people need to hear, because they don't hear it enough. I think that we sometimes underestimate what our potential is and what we're capable of. And, I think we see it too often, especially in lower income settings where the odds are very much stacked against you. So the first thing I would say is that you can do it. I think the second thing I would say is that you can do it, but it's hard to do it alone. I certainly would not be where I am today if it weren't for many other people around me, from my family to really good friends and mentors. And so the second thing that I would encourage students to do is to find those people that are in their corner, that are supporting them, that are trying to help them realize their potential. And I think with those two, they'll go a long way. Of course, there are structural issues that are hard to combat. I can't say something to someone and help them find a house, or help them find meals for the next 30 days, or healthcare for their loved one that they're taking care of. I can't solve that through a conversation. But I think for people in those circumstances, I would certainly say don't give up. Those circumstances oftentimes make us stronger. Whether we see it then or not, they will help make you stronger, and you will learn from them, you will grow from them. And perhaps what you do afterwards is because of that experience, right? A lot of what I do, or what I'm trying to do, is because of my experiences as a child and adolescent in Southern California. And I think that it's because those experiences meant a lot to me. And I think that others would similarly feel the same way, maybe not in the moment, but perhaps after, when reflecting on them.
Your words are so true. And if people could just bring that to their deepest recesses of their being, then they can overcome the most difficult situations out there. So I think it's beautiful that you were able to overcome that with everyone by your side, helping you through that. It's awesome. It's just so awe-inspiring, considering where you are now and where you're about to go. It's just amazing. Your profile caught my interest on LinkedIn a couple years back. And I've been watching your trajectory for quite some time now, and just being in awe of, like, okay, knowing where you came from and being inspired by that. It's like, I know where this guy came from and look what he's doing. And I can't even imagine what you're about to accomplish once you finish your training. I'm excited for you and your future. Let's start to dig into that a bit. Unless there's something else there. We stopped kind of at your undergrad. You were doing, you changed majors. You wound up pre-med. And presumably you did really well at USC. You start to think about med school, and you're like, man, I could probably get into medical school. And then the next thought is, maybe I could go to Harvard. Is that possible? I should probably put an application. It's probably a long shot. I don't know if that's what you're thinking, but if it were me in that circumstance, I would be thinking those things. Of course, I've thought those thoughts in my own circumstances, like, maybe I could do this, but it's unlikely. I'll try and see what happens, see what comes of it. Bring us to that moment where you're at USC, you're hanging out, doing your work, about ready to finish, and you're in the midst of applying to medical school. What was going through your head at that time?
Oh, so much, Rich. It was a great time, but at the same time, it was a crazy one. When I first decided to be a pre-medical student, I did not believe too much in myself. By the time I applied to medical school, I did feel a little bit more confident. I think for a number of reasons, how well I did academically at USC, what I was learning, I was teaching, what I was researching, a number of reasons. But even then, when I applied to medical school, I had no idea what would happen because I didn't know anyone that had done this before. Right? My parents' third and fourth grade education, my brothers graduated from high school. And no one that I knew very closely had applied to medical school or become a doctor at that. And so I tossed my hat in the ring. I did everything that I thought I could and applied to many medical schools in 2016. By the time the fall came around, I was receiving really good news. I was getting a lot of interviews from essentially every medical school that I applied to. And it was, I think, a moment where I started to realize that what I had overcome, my story, the things that I had done professionally in college and in high school really meant something, and they said something about me. And so I started to see, okay, people that I don't know believe in me a lot, and they want to talk to me, and that's amazing. And I am more than happy to talk to them and share my story and why I want to become a doctor. And so the interview season went well. And March came around, 2017. And I remember waking up in bed that day in my apartment on Adams Street or Boulevard, one of those, and opened my phone and got the notification that Harvard Medical School accepted me. And it was a moment that I wasn't sure would come. I was getting good news, like I said, but this was a school that my parents knew about is one way to put it, in that my parents, right, with a 3rd and 4th grade education, who only speak Spanish, a little bit of English, who never thought about college, knew what Harvard meant. They were obviously overcome with emotion, as my brothers were as well. And, it was a really amazing day and an amazing moment. And again, something that I wouldn't have received if it weren't for a lot of people.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. What an incredible feeling that must have been. And yeah, it's a huge accomplishment to get into any university, much less Harvard Medical School. So you get accepted to Harvard Med School. Bring us to that moment when tell us about your graduation from USC quickly, and then drop us into that moment when you arrive in Boston and you start med school.
Yeah. So graduated from USC in 2017. I had the luxury of having my entire family there. So it was a really special day, seeing my parents, my brothers, now a niece that I had at that point, or that I still have, my first niece. She was there, and I think to see everyone, including my friends, including my coach, Schrader, that I mentioned from high school, he came for my USC graduation. Wow. So to see a lot of these folks there that had really helped me get to that moment where I was graduating near the top of my class and going to Harvard Medical School was a really special day, and a day I certainly won't forget. And from there, I went to Harvard, and it was the first time that I would be leaving California for an extended period of time. I had spent a summer in St. Louis during my college years doing some research, but beyond that, I had really not traveled much because we never had the money to travel, and never had spent a significant amount of time elsewhere. And so it was my first time kind of heading out on my own. And I still remember taking an Uber from the airport to the Longwood Medical area, to Vanderbilt Hall in particular, and dropping me off right there and looking to my left and seeing Gordon Hall, which is the big building that a lot of people take photos of at Harvard Medical School. And just having this feeling of, wow, this is beyond my wildest dreams. Never thought I would be here. And now I have this bag that weighs certainly over 50 pounds on my arm with all my clothes and nothing else. And I'm going to check into my room. And so it was a very special day where I came to Boston and was getting ready for the white coat ceremony. And it was really nice because my parents were, for the first time, going to also visit Boston for the white coat ceremony. Wow. They came with my niece, Bella, and, they spent a couple of days here in Boston with me and got a chance to attend the white coat ceremony. From then, I wasn't sure exactly what it was I wanted to do within medicine when I got to Harvard. I had this gut feeling that maybe I wanted to be a surgeon. I thought perhaps orthopedic surgery because I had done research in the area in college, and because I was an athlete as well. And I love to think about those mechanics and, helping other athletes be healthy. Did a couple of shadowing opportunities at one of the hospitals here and realized that it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I started scrambling. What is it that I want to do? Where do I want to be in 4 years? And ultimately came to no answer. So I went on with my first year of medical school, trying to figure out what it is I wanted to do clinically. But I did find an answer that year. And that was that I loved thinking about health policy and healthcare delivery and healthcare access. And it shouldn't have been a surprise to me. As I mentioned earlier, I had thought about those issues long before I even knew I was thinking about them, from the moment that my mother was sick in the motel to the day I wished my Tia had access to healthcare. Those were top of mind for me. And so during my first year of medical school, I made this mental commitment that it was an area in which I would explore and in which I would dive into while I was a medical student. And so it was my first year of medical school when I started reading a lot more about healthcare policy, public policy. What can we do at a systems level to ensure that people live healthy lives? And I continued to pursue that. My first year, second year of medical school came along, where at Harvard in your second year, you go into the hospital, which is a little bit earlier than you do at many other medical schools. Yeah. And I remember being on my rotations and trying to learn as much as I could. And when I was out of the hospital, rushing over to a meeting on the other side of the bridge to talk with a group of doctors and medical students that were trying to improve care delivery for people experiencing homelessness at the Massachusetts General Hospital. And so I was trying to really balance these two worlds that I was trying to be a part of, being a medical student and learning, the clinical care, in addition to trying to better understand this crazy world of healthcare policy and healthcare in general. Yeah. And so that was my second year. And after that year, Rich, I actually still wasn't sure what I wanted to do clinically. And so I kept searching. And my third year of medical school, thought, I think it's going to be something where I am at the door to where people are trying to enter our healthcare system. And to me, that was either emergency medicine or internal medicine. And so it was my third year where I started going back and forth about emergency medicine and internal medicine. And I couldn't come to a decision because the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Yeah. So the COVID-19 pandemic hit during my third year of medical school, and it meant that we were kicked out of the hospitals temporarily. So I only had a chance to do one rotation in January of 2020, my emergency medicine rotation. We were kicked out in March when I was in the classroom, and then we were let back in, I believe it was early July, if I remember correctly. And it was a weird time to go back into the hospital at that time. A lot of COVID, a lot of people were sick. We weren't seeing, the same bread and butter that we were seeing earlier. So I still was trying to figure out what it is I wanted to do clinically. But during that time, during my third year, was when I made this commitment to take a leave of absence from medical school after I was accepted to the MPP MBA program at Harvard Business School and the Kennedy School of Government, so that I could better understand the issues we were dealing with, so that I could better understand how to put forward solutions to a lot of the problems that I saw growing up and that I continued to see affect my patients in the hospital. And so I took this leave that would be 3 years, and that I had no idea how things would turn out afterwards. But it was something I was passionate about, something I really wanted to do and learn and, ultimately use for the better in the future. And so in 2020, I left medical school in August temporarily and enrolled in this MPP MBA program. And in that program, I learned so much from not just the professors and the content in class, but from my classmates who were from all over the states, all over the world, who were from consulting to government, working in government, to private equity, to clinicians, to public health leaders, education, nonprofit leaders, you name it. Yeah. There were so many people that I met over the course of the 3 years that I got a chance to learn from their comments in the classroom to conversations we had outside of the classroom, that really helped me grow and better understand how our world works and how we might be able to make it better. And that program I finished this last May, 2023. And the week after graduating, went back to medical school to complete my fourth year. Didn't have too much time off. I kind of wish I had a little bit more, but it was all right. And I went straight into rotations, and I just finished 3 rotations and finished applying to residency and studying for the Step 2 exam currently.
Amazing. That's amazing. Wow. That's such a cool journey. So a total of 6 years now, you'll have done a total of 7 when you finish med school here next May, correct?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. And then internal med, 3 to 4 years, depending on what path you go down and where you go. And then after that, big question mark, don't know yet. And that's good. It's okay. I think, right? Do you have some inkling as to where you think your journey will take you out beyond? Is it too far out to start thinking about that, what that looks like?
I want to think about it a lot, and I do, and everyone tells me I shouldn't because it is too far out, and that serendipity and luck and opportunity will play a role in what it is I do eventually.
Yeah. That's great. It's great training and such a great broad swath of, the challenges that we're met with in healthcare and the world in different contexts, not just healthcare, but business in general and world economics and public policy in general. It's such a great starting point to think about complex problems, both during, the clinical context of your training, which is, ongoing now and will, ramp up once you hit residency. But by the time you finish residency, all of that training will come back. It's going to be used, of course, during the context of your journey during residency, but I just can't imagine. I'm super excited for you what that will look like when you're done with residency. It makes sense to me that probably inevitably you will, be met with huge opportunities to make great strides in the world of healthcare. Given your training, given your persona, just the essence of you, I think people will hand you the keys to a lot of really important questions, and you'll find yourself on some pretty extraordinary teams solving some really difficult problems. As you and I both know, healthcare is in such a tough place right now. We're seeing pretty incredible strides with regard to access, but we're still not there. There's a lot of people who are left by the wayside in terms of access. And so I'm excited to see how your career unfolds and how you hope to change it for the better. And something that I didn't mention actually that's really of interest is the fact that once you graduate in May with your MD, I think you're going to be the first, correct me if I'm wrong, the first to have completed all three of those degrees back to back. Is that accurate? Which is kind of,
yes.
Yeah, it's so wild. And the university's been around for nearly 400 years. So I think that's an interesting thing to note that it hasn't been done before. So my hat is off for that. Congrats on that, and about ready to be done with it.
Thank you.
We're coming up in just a few months. You'll be done with school. Well, the formal academic component of it.
That's right.
So, and my wife and I are always looking for good excuses to go back to Boston and hang out. So maybe we'll be there. I don't know.
That'd be amazing.
Let's talk a bit about healthcare. Let's begin. I want to tap your knowledge and thought process on how we might continue to change healthcare in the current context. Knowing that you want to potentially do internal medicine and how, primary care is impacted by government. Let's dive into that. Let's talk about how, your time at HBS, HKS really started to shapeshift your mindset with regard to that and those challenges.
Yeah, there's a lot that I could say about this topic, Rich. I think in general, there are a few components to healthcare that a lot of people think about, right? One is healthcare access. The other is healthcare delivery. The other is health equity. And then there's the cost/payment side of things too. For the healthcare access side, I think that's one of the most important, if not the most important aspect we need to think about right now, because there are currently about 24 million, I want to say, 8 to 9% of the US population, people that don't have access to health insurance. And that's just something we don't see in many other developed countries. It's something that we have in the US, a country that is supposed to be at the very top. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have access to healthcare, and that includes my parents right now. And so that's the first big piece that I think we need to think about a lot. And there are a lot of potential options that people have proposed, right? Whether it is expanding Medicaid in states that haven't been expanded, whether it's providing Medicare for all, as some like to say, for the population, a public option through Medicare, or a separate plan is something else that you see too. There are a lot of different options that people have put forward. I think in general, we'll let the policymakers come up with that decision, but we need one of those options to cover every person in the country. We need to make sure that everyone has access to healthcare. And I'm not talking about, access to the greatest hospital in the US. I'm talking about like everyone just needs health insurance and a doctor, a primary care doctor that they can see when they have a problem, that can refer them to a specialist when they need to go and see someone for a particular problem. And someone that's looking out for them. That's what we need. And we don't have that. So that's the first thing. And of course, we can't get there without talking about costs and how we finance things. Is it going to be through higher taxes? Is it going to be through taxing hospitals a little bit more or something of the like? A lot of folks are, going to argue about what's the better solution. And I'm not going to do that here. What I will say is that we certainly need to balance cost and access, but I, for one, am more than willing to pay a little bit more if it means that the person down the street can go and see a doctor when they really need to. So that's what I would say about that topic. And then on the health equity side, I think is really overlies a lot of this, right? When we think about healthcare and the provision of it, we want to deliver good healthcare. It's not just any healthcare, right? We want to make sure everyone has access, but we want to make sure that they have access to high quality healthcare, that people are living healthy lives. And so when I think about that topic, there are a lot of disparities that come to my mind, right? Why is it that people who don't speak English well go to the hospital and come out and have worse outcomes than people who do speak English well? Why is it that a Black person that lives in Roxbury has a much worse life expectancy than a white person who lives in Fenway, right here down the street? There are so many answers to that, from the delivery of healthcare to our social care system in general and our safety net. But the point is that we need to think about those things when we're talking about healthcare, when we're trying to fix healthcare. And without thinking about them, we're just going to exacerbate a lot of these problems that already exist. And then the last thing that I'll say is on the care delivery front, which somewhat is very much related actually to health equity. We also need to think about when someone walks into the hospital, how do we make sure that we're delivering the best care to this individual right in front of me? How do we make sure that, we are getting them to the CT scan when they need to get there, as fast as they can get there? How do we make sure that they're coming in and they feel comfortable, right? How do we make sure their experience is a good one? And so there are a lot of aspects of care delivery that we also need to work on, which we're not perfect at. And so I think I'm painting a picture here of an ideal world, which of course we don't live in. But I think these are the 4 aspects of healthcare that we really need to improve and think about doing that through a very systematic and a very careful way.
That's a solid answer. I agree. We see a lot of that already beginning to kind of unfold with these large corporations. They're like Amazon, 2022, bought One Health. But One Health started there. Actually, it was Iora Health in the Boston area. They were a part of this conglomerate of, I think, 6 states. But the whole construct of that conglomerate of companies has been predicated on primary care and how do we best deliver that in a way that's meaningful for all people and having full access to that care. Still, largely dependent on whether or not you're insured, but still taking very little resources and making them work, setting people up with primary care physicians and coaches simultaneous. Imagine you're in a clinical setting. You may have experienced during your rotations where you have a doctor and a coach inside the room with the patient, and the doctor's done with their component of that visit, and they hand it off to a coach who then has more time to kind of go deep into medication management or, helping them with their diabetes, helping them to, up-level their ability to care for themselves. All right. Who are some of the contemporary heroes, people that are real or not real? They could be any heroes that you've thought of or try to emulate your life after, people that have had impact on your life.
Yeah. I mean, the obvious and easy answer is my parents. So I will skip that for now since I've talked about them at length. I think a couple of the other people that I think about may be surprising to people that don't know me, but unsurprising to people that do know me. Kobe Bryant. He is one of my heroes. And I often think about why that's the case. I think one is growing up low income, you don't have too many role models. You have your parents, you have your brothers, but beyond that, there aren't that many people that that, are doctors, as I mentioned earlier, right? Or lawyers or entertainers or whatever it might be. And one person that was a constant in my life was actually Kobe Bryant. I watched the Lakers religiously with my brothers. I rooted for them and I still root for them to this day. And I just saw what he did on the court and really admired it. And so just like seeing his mentality, right, the Mamba mentality, I think is something that I've always admired, and a work ethic that I certainly tried to mimic myself in my own way. And so he's definitely one of those heroes. I look at and say, wow, I want to be a little bit more like you, because I want to perfect my craft. I don't know what my craft is yet, but whatever it is, I want to make sure that I put in the time and commitment needed to be like you are in your craft. And then there are, people that I know more personally that have that do function currently as my heroes. Mentors. I have a couple of great mentors here at Harvard. Dr. Alistair Martin is one in particular who went to medical school at Harvard, Kennedy School as well, did his emergency medicine residency here, and in that process created a lot of programs to help the vulnerable populations in the greater Boston area and beyond. Wow. He started Get Waivered, a program to ensure that emergency medicine physicians can prescribe buprenorphine in the hospital or in emergency departments. GOT Vax, which me and many others helped him launch, where we were vaccinating people in the Boston communities that did not have access or great access to the COVID-19 vaccines, and a number of other organizations that he started and continues to lead. And I look up to him a lot and really admire the work that he's done. A couple of others that I'd like to mention, Dr. Jose Figueroa is another person that I've worked with over the years that, is a really good human and someone that really knows healthcare policy well. And what I like about him is that he has a really good combination of the intellect and the academic, but also the person that really understands these problems and connects with them. And I think it shows in his work. And then the last person, when I think about mentors and heroes, is Dr. Dave Chokshi. He's someone else that I've had many conversations with over the last several years at this point. And he was the former commissioner at the New York City Department of Public Health, and currently now a professor in New York, in addition to a primary care physician at NYU, where he sees a lot of people experiencing homelessness and other vulnerable folks. And I really admire a lot of the work that he's done, both personally and professionally. He's talked to me a little bit about his family, and every time I hear him speak, I just feel the compassion. Wow. And it's something that I hope that I also have when I speak about my loved ones. And when he does the work that he needs to do professionally, you still see that compassion shine through. Whether it's an article he writes in the New York Times, and he wrote one recently actually about healthy living, to a research paper on a topic related to telehealth and access to telehealth in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic in New York. These are all things that I admire about him. And I think it's one of the reasons why when I think about my mentors, they really are my heroes.
So we're going to go super existential here and talk a bit about what do you think the meaning of life is? Yeah. Why are we here?
Yeah, that's a big question. Well, I don't have the answer. I'll preempt by saying that to the public. I don't have the answer, but I have thoughts on the question. And I think in general, we are here for a number of reasons, but one is to really feel something. And what I mean by that is, I think when I reflect on, my life and the moments that meant the most to me, the moments that I look back on and feel really emotional about, there are moments where I really connected with someone, whether it was a stranger that I, handed $20 to at the Walmart in LA, who broke down on my shoulder and started crying because he could feed his son that day, to, hugging my mom when I got that acceptance letter from college, or, when one of my best friends gets married. Those moments where I feel happy, where I feel the love, where I feel compassionate, I think is something that, we all in life are trying to seek and deserve, really.
Right.
And I think those moments can come from both receiving and giving, whether it's a gift or a compliment or something else, right? Those moments where you feel the compassion, the ambition, the love, feel secure, like that's a human feeling that is hard to describe. And I think I think we're here, we have an opportunity, I should say, to feel those moments as humans. And so therefore, I think each of us has a responsibility almost to make sure that others feel that, because that's really what life is about. It is about making sure that people can be happy, that they can feel compassion, that they can feel love in whatever way they experience that the most. And so I think that's definitely something that's been on my mind a little bit. And then the last thing there is, I think we're also here to make the world a better place, in whatever way that is. And there is no one path to do that, right? You can become a doctor, you can make movies about a topic that you really are passionate about. You can be a lawyer that advocates for a certain group of people, whatever it is. I think one of the reasons why we're here and something that we should really think about a lot is how can I make that positive difference? I'm trying to figure it out myself. I'm trying to figure out the best way through which I can do that. And I hope that others do too, because I do think that we are here to leave the next generation better off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Really well said. That's beautiful. I love that insight. And I definitely agree with all of it. Tell us a bit about what kind of, you've already kind of tapped into that a bit, legacy, and what do you hope to be remembered by? You're about ready to hit residency. Once you finish residency, not knowing what you're going to do specifically career-wise, but what type of legacy do you hope to leave behind?
Yeah, great question, Rich. So I think the first thing that comes to my mind is just being a good person. And what that means to me is being a good father one day, being a good husband one day, being a good son to my parents, a good brother to Josue, Irvin, Lester, and being a good friend to the several people in my life right now that I'm lucky enough to know. And so as long as that is true, I think I will be really happy at the end of the day. When it comes to some of the more professional work, I think I hope that people can look back at what I've done and what I hopefully do in the future and say, he did the right thing. And what I mean by that is not, he invested in this or he started this company and did whatever, but it's more of he made the right decision by considering the humans around him, by considering his colleagues, his employers, his employees. He always made the right call when people were on the line. And I think that as long as I do that, as long as I, keep people at the very top of my mind, then I think I'll be really happy with that. And the accolades and the achievements and such aren't going to matter, really. What's going to matter, I think, is the impact that I have on people. And I hope I have that positive impact by, keeping them at the top of my mind.
Wow. I think that's a good note to end on. Really, really beautiful thoughts. I love how you think. And I'm so excited to see how your career takes flight during residency and after. I just thank you so much for your time today. It means a lot. I'm very honored for you to be here with me in my early iterative stages of the Failing Up podcast. You are everything this podcast is about. You have embodied the idea of failing up, coming from a place of difficulty, but beauty and love, and rising further than most would ever think to aspire to. And you're just in the beginning stages of your life. So thank you for being who you are, for dreaming about a beautiful future. And thank you for just helping to create that along the way. Whatever teams you find yourself on, I'm going to be your biggest fan. I will be your biggest fan. I think you're an amazing dude. And thank you so much. Any last thoughts you'd like to hand over to the rest of our audience?
I just want to say thank you. to you, Rich, for having me on and for telling our stories, for telling some of your story as well. It's something that people deserve to hear. So thank you, and thank you to all the listeners out there.
Awesome. Very cool. Thanks again. Hello again, and if you have made it this far, thank you. I appreciate you hanging on to the very end. Again, I really hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll just remind you that all episodes of the Feeling It podcast can be accessed at completely zero cost in all formats by going to my website, richardthandley.com. If you're learning from and enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's a terrific zero-cost way to support us. In addition, please subscribe to the podcast at both Spotify and Apple, where you can also leave us up to a 5-star review. If you have any questions for me or comments about the podcast or guests that you'd like me to consider hosting, please put those in the comment section on YouTube. I do read all the comments, and if you're not already following me on social media, I encourage you to stay connected using the links I provided in the About section of this YouTube channel. If you haven't already subscribed to our newsletter, it is a zero-cost newsletter called the Dr. Rich Newsletter, and in it you get free podcast summaries as well as toolkits. The toolkits are brief PDFs that list off the specific science-backed tips and protocols for things like improving your sleep, focus, fitness, longevity, and also focus on life, leadership, and career. Again, all available completely at zero cost to you. Simply go to richardthandley.com, provide us your email in the pop-up window, and you'll be added to our mailing list. Like you, I hate spam, thus we do not share your email with anybody and try our very best to serve up only solid, enjoyable content worth your time and attention. Thank you once again for joining me today, and hope to see you again real soon. Until then, I challenge you to buckle up and fail up. Thanks.